I have the pleasant opportunity today to introduce Dr. Gardner Campbell, who is the Director of Professional Development and Innovative Initiatives at Virginia Tech University. I was thinking this morning, why do we do this ritual of introductions? Why don't we just have the guest come up? Well, one reason at least is that it's an opportunity to say complimentary things about the speaker, which in the case of Gardner Campbell is easy and a delightful thing to do. But I also thought if I were really being candid, one of the key purposes of an introduction is to persuade the audience that the speaker really is worthy of your attention. And then it occurred to me, actually, if that's the case, then I'm really redundant up here. As soon as Gardner Campbell begins to speak, you will need no persuasion from me about why he is well worth listening to. Those of you who may know Gardner Campbell's keynote address at the Open Ed conference in Vancouver last October already know his wit and his flair and his energy, but most importantly, his penetrating analysis of the challenges of technology and education that lie before us. This isn't surprising that presentation had that character, given Campbell's distinguished career as a founder and a leader of programs on innovation in teaching over the past 2 decades. At the University of Richmond, the University of San Diego, Baylor University, and now at Virginia Tech. Campbell has served on the program committee of EDUCAUSE and on the advisory board of the National Institute for Technology and the Liberal Arts, and he is also on the editorial boards of the Journal of Interactive Technology and Pedagogy and the Journal of Information Fluency. What I find most persuasive, however, as a reason that Gardner Campbell is well worth listening to, is this. In the current hype about the applications of technology to teaching, the focus really has been heavily on instruction in the sciences, in math, and in engineering. I suspect that the number of MOOCs, for example, that have enrollments of 10,000 or more that are in math, science, or engineering probably cannot be counted on multiple hands. So far as I know, the number of MOOCs that have that kind of enrollment in a course on the humanities, I think, might be 1. There is much skepticism in the midst of all of this that technologies can provide much leverage in the teaching of the humanities, which are, of course, dear to the hearts, especially of those of us who adhere to core curricula. So for me, what is most intriguing and persuasive about is that Gardner Campbell is not a professor of math. He is not a professor of electrical engineering. He is a professor of English and a scholar of the writings of John Milton and a life member of the Milton Society of America. Campbell is, in short, a prophet of our future from the realm of the humanities, of the sort who can rivet our attention, as he did in his keynote address at Vancouver, with the teasing thematic line from T.S. Eliot's The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, and I read the line here, "That is not it at all. That is not what I meant at all." It is a wonderfully poetic line that might be spoken to us, not just by Campbell, but also by these innovative technologies themselves, calling us to be attentive so that we do not misunderstand our future. Please welcome Gardner Campbell.
So if anyone knows any songs or stories while we do the laptop switchover, I'm fine with that. I think a little entertainment during the scene shifting. Let's see, is everything on? Never blow into a microphone, you will disrupt the diaphragm. I do have a small engineering background. I was an audio engineer, or I like to say that I am when I'm talking to my fellow engineers. I know the difference between a cardioid and an omnidirectional microphone, for example. Thank you very much. It's been great to be here.
Just use this one.
Yep, go ahead. That's perfect. And I found that I would remember the engineering data more if I actually did things with these cardioid omnidirectional microphones, the ships, capsules, whatever, XLR connections. That's as far as I go. If I were actually recording music, right, it was very nice to be able to do my audio engineering in the context of, let's say, the North Carolina Symphony, or Michelle Petrucciani, a jazz pianist with glass bones disease, or even Doc Watson, whose hand I got to shake about, I guess, 10 or 15 years ago. So no quarrel with the scientists, no quarrel with the mathematicians, a few quarrels with the humanities people, but we'll get over those. But the idea of context and having something that really was about making meaning, thank you, and about building stuff, that's what I was always interested in. And what I'd like to share with you today are a few things I've been working on, some tinkering I've been doing with teaching, learning, and technology over the last 6 years, I guess it's been, or depending on how you count it, all of those decades that were referred to so kindly in that fantastic introduction, probably the most insightful introduction I've had. So now the pressure's really on. Thank goodness I've had this already. If I could just get the last part of this. Brian Blakely was very kind to take me to where the coffee was, and I saw that this was the brand, and I tweeted it immediately because I've got some dear colleagues back at Virginia Tech who will now want this to be in our commissary, because one of the things we keep working on in what we call the learning revolution is this idea that we want to make noise, stand up for what we believe in, work together to get our voices heard, and that has to do with faculty and with students and with staff. And by staff, I mean the senior administrators. I mean the people who keep the buildings clean. I mean everyone. One of the wonderful things about working in higher education is that people do that by and large because there's something that draws them to the mission. It's easy to forget that mission in the midst of all of the urgent tasks we have, but we forget it at our peril, because I think there are plenty of places in society that would like to take what we have and turn it into something else, partly for good reasons. We are a stubborn lot, or maybe I'm just projecting. But also for some very bad reasons, for some things that are maximized and not optimized. So my choice has always been to be in the conversation, to seek optimization, and at times that is maximization, as in rabble-rouser coffee. And I'd just like to share a few of my thoughts with you today, have a chance to have some conversation as well, and hopefully entice you into a network, which I will talk about in a little bit. But I thank you very much for having me here today, and special thanks to Beth for the invitation. It's a real privilege to be here, and actually quite humbling on such an emotional day. So of course we need to start with Billy Joel. Actually that's out of date. No, we want to start with Billy Joel. You see what changed? Right? This is to prove my quantitative literacy, so work with me, all right? Right? So, up to 2,408,431 views, 14,886 likes. People insist the like is irrelevant, a trivial bit of information. You've never been on a dark and stormy night all alone then, I guess. Likes can be very important in some context. 324 dislikes. These are people that you will never win over. So that's just the cost of doing business when it comes to civilization. How many of you have seen this YouTube video? A few of you. Good. Then you know the story. You know, Louis Pasteur says, chance favors the prepared mind. And there was a prepared mind and some pretty good digits in the audience that day at Vanderbilt University when Billy Joel, Mr. Billy Joel, okay, after Michael Jackson, the top-selling solo artist in the United States, Mr. Billy Joel. He's there, he's doing a talk, and this kid says in the Q&A, I've been fortunate to play with your saxophone player, and I love your music. My favorite of your tunes is New York State of Mind. Could I play that with you? And the kid says, I would like to accompany you. And Billy says, sure. Now, this is what we would call in my profession an agile teaching moment. If you can imagine, it would be something on the order of this, which I would actually kind of welcome, although it might mess up the order of events. If anyone here said, Gardner, I've seen some of your stuff on YouTube. I actually know the whole T.S. Eliot bit. Could I come up and do that now? And I would go, sure, because I am not Billy Joel, nor was meant to be. And that's another quote from the same poem, except the Billy Joel thing, it was Hamlet, but that was then. So, here we are. This kid stands up. Billy Joel says, sure. Billy Joel doesn't know what's going to happen. It could be an embarrassment for the kid. It could be an embarrassment for Billy Joel. It could go off the rails in any number of ways, including off the rails and being shared on YouTube, and 2,408,431 people could see it go off the rails. But that's not what happened. This young man had practiced. He knew his stuff. What he needed was the moment to be able to knit that into a network of practice. He had some chutzpah, as we say, and it turns out that Billy Joel apparently has chutzpah too. In fact, some of you may remember his parting line when he was doing concerts in the 70s and 80s. Does anybody remember he would say it at the end of every, well, tweet it, okay? Because if you know it, tweet it. That's the rule. And the hashtag is BC eTeaching. Actually, the day seems to have dropped off because people were jealous of the 140 character limit. So, you know, this is agile hashtagging, okay? So he went up and he got on the stage with Billy Joel. Billy Joel said, "What key do you play this in?" And the kid said, "What key would you like me to play it in?" And it just went up from there. And the kid was good. The kid was really good. He knew to play in a way that would put forward his own talents, but not so much that it was all about him, because that ruins the network, right? So when the student who asks for the agile teaching moment then ruins the agility by making it all about that particular moment, that doesn't work. When the faculty member ruins the agility of the moment, that doesn't work. You got to keep the network alive. And if you keep the network alive, in this case the network of a cheeky young man and a cheeky man a little farther along in life's journey, as I like to say, something magical happened. And it got picked up by the bigger network, which is not different from the network of these two people. It is an electronic representation of what was happening within each mind and across these minds. And I mean, of course, Boing Boing, which is the website for all sorts of remarkable things. This is a wormhole you can go down. It's a singularity box, and you come out days later. Well, maybe again, I'm projecting. So there we go. College student asks if he can play piano for Billy Joel, and Joel says, okay. The results are fabulous. Now, how many faculty members in the hall? Come on, be brave. I know it's the end of term and you're trying to go back into your civvies, but I see you. How many students who have had courses with faculty members recently are in the hall? A few of you? Okay, I see you in your civvies. That's good. You know that the results can be terrible. Might as well admit it. But the results here were fabulous. And people, because it's the internet, started talking. And here's how they talked. A college student, he may be, but that kid's got some serious chops. The flight time shows. Has anyone got better hearing than mine? Did he say Michael Pollack or Michael Pollard? I want to remember the name. And then something very interesting happens. Someone gives the information, but it's not just a name. It's a link. So here's something to remember if the rest of it goes off the rails and the results for me are not fabulous today. I hope you have a great rest of the day. The weather outside is delightful. Remember, if your name is a link, you're in the network. And one of the things I feel very strongly that we need to teach ourselves, all the learners whom we serve, all the learners we remain, how to make your name a link, not simply an identifier, but a bridge. What was that young man's name? Why? That's his name. It's a link. Chance favors the prepared mind. When the question comes up and someone says, who was that guy who talked? Who was that guy who introduced the guy who talked? Who is the woman who's at Harvard now? Who's the woman who introduced the woman? Make your name a link. It's vital. That puts your identity in this network that we are building together. No one forced it upon us. We made it. We made it because at a very deep core, I believe, our names are links, unique identifiers that help us know and be known to each other. Here's the site. Who was that young man? Well, he was Michael Pollock. He is Michael Pollock. He was ready. He was ready for the moment. He was ready with his name as a link. He was ready with his presence online. I don't know how this happened. I don't know if he had a faculty member who encouraged him. I hope so. He was at Vanderbilt University. There's probably some good faculty there. Most are in the room today, I understand, but there's probably a few folks at Vanderbilt who are okay. I don't know how this happened. Maybe he just picked it up. Young folks do that, you know. They figure out the internet. It happens. Sometimes they do that in ways that actually outstrip the bounds of insert new vendor solution here. That's good. Obviously, the rabble-rousing is working. Here, by contrast, is how in my beloved Commonwealth of Virginia, the other Commonwealth, the one that's a little farther down the road, here is how, quite recently, perhaps it's been revised, but you'll see in a moment why I doubt it, here is how we are preparing seniors to enter higher education, the place where you can turn your name into a link and start to see some immediate consequences. These are the standards of learning. Part of the, the race to leave children behind at the top or the bottom? No child racing to be left behind at the top. So this is a strand, communication, speaking, listening, media literacy, grade level 12. Look at that horrible thing at the top. Can you see it? Let me see if I can see it. Marked as final. An author has marked this document as final to discourage editing. No kidding. The student will make a formal oral presentation in a group or individually because we must specify what the student will do to know what the student will do so that we can assess what the student has done. And if we're really good, we'll design the assessment so that the results are already known simply by the elegance, clarity, and exhaustiveness of the rubric. You will see that item E, if you're good with eye charts, or like me, you have trifocals, use grammatically correct language, including vocabulary appropriate to the topic, audience, and purpose. And then, shortly after that, evaluate formal presentations, including personal, digital, visual, textual, and technological. I am an adjective I would like a noun to modify. My daughter tells me that they don't say epic fail anymore. Are there young folks who can help me out with some of the hip youth lingo? Well, I would say epic fail. That's terrible. That's terrible. It's a mistake. Okay, no problem. We make mistakes. Let's not lock the document to discourage further editing. We are needing to help each other. This is not a networked document. In fact, it's not even a very good set of rubrics, in my view. Although a good set of rubrics may be an oxymoron. I don't know. Is there a rubric fan in the house? I am so sorry. Do you have a rubric for hissing? Because I would like to see. I would say that was about a 10 on a scale. That was pretty good. So at least we got some metrics in today. I'm very happy about that. But anyway, thank you. And let's talk, because yeah, absolutely. So here we go, the road to digital literacy from Adams 12, 5-star schools. Any Adams 12 people in the house? Because I'm going to rabble the rouse now. Okay? This is about how we map out what it is we think we're doing. Information literacy, locate information from a variety of sources, including print and digital. Evaluate information I'm not going to read all of this. You know how this goes. You know this road. It's a nowhere road. Information literacy, technology literacy, and then digital citizenship. Use technology and internet. Use internet. Responsibly and safely. How many of you used internet today? I brush my teeth with internet. Do you imagine that young man at Vanderbilt University has attained digital citizenship? I would say it goes a lot farther than this. As my former boss and dear friend and mentor, Chip German, likes to say, we're looking through the wrong end of the telescope. Really we are. And the people who are suffering are our students. We're suffering too, but we like to think about the people in our charge, and we should. And they're not going to get there with this road to digital literacy. Now, I want to be very clear. I am sure thoughtful people spent a long time putting this together. I know for a fact because earlier I was, many, many years ago, in discussions about things that were kind of proto-standards of learning. And I know people spend a lot of their finite days arguing over good rubrics. People need to know, how are you going to assess me? What is it I need to do? People spend a lot of time coming up with infographics, which is great. These things are not in themselves evidence of carelessness or thoughtlessness, but they are, to me, evidence that we simply don't understand the scale of the change in civilization that we have built by building interactive, personal, networked computing that now is covering a significant part of the globe. We simply don't understand what we have built. That's a bug in us as a species. It's also a feature. Not understanding what we build is part of what lets us build beyond what we've been able to do before. It's actually a very precious resource, though risky, granted. Here's one instance of risky beyond what you understand building. This, of course, you know as the Titanic. That was built beyond understanding. That was something that incorporated a certain amount of recklessness. I assume that you've at least seen the most recent Titanic movie, so you know this does not end very well.
Spoiled it.
All right, that's true. If you watch it all the way to the end, though, it's complicated. Let's just put it that way. So you can see there was a problem with the stuff on the left. You know what those are? Lifeboats. And the problem had to do with the stuff on the right. Those are deck chairs. People like to rearrange deck chairs on the boats of sinking ships, on the decks of sinking ships. That's what we like to do because we understand deck chairs. Lifeboats, it's more complicated, especially if you're trying not to be conspicuous about the fact that we know it won't sink. Sorry, I did it again. If anybody didn't get any of that, the Titanic sinks, okay? This will make you stronger as you watch the movie, okay? So there it is. This is actually something that my wife, the superstar librarian, furnished to me, as is her wont. This is from the Titanic Real-Time History Channel Twitter stream, which also was a set of spoilers, okay? And the hashtag photographer just taking a picture of the public walking the deck. I am sure they will want some lasting memories. Oh yeah, it was a night to remember. Looking through the wrong end of the telescope, rearranging deck chairs on the surface of the Titanic. These are things that can occupy us. Faculty committees, student organizations, vendors and solutions. Imagine the vendor of deck chair solutions for the Titanic. A lot of deck chairs, a lot of time. Got to have budgets, got to have metrics, got to have assessment. How many people can fit on the deck, etc. Unfortunately, the wrong end of the telescope, not looking at the lifeboats. This keeps happening. How many of you have seen this commercial? Well, you're going to see it now. I will tell you, it does not end well, but this will make you strong. Okay, let's see if I can make it go. Oh, the spinning beach ball of death. Here we go. I love that. That's part of Apple's little howdy do, I'm crashing.
I stand before you today to apologize. The system has failed you. I have failed you. I have failed to help you share your talent with the world, and the world needs talent more than ever, yet it's being wasted every day by an educational system steeped in tradition and old ideas. It was time for a new tradition. It's time to realize talent isn't just in schools like this one, it's everywhere. It's time to use technology to rewrite the rules of education. To learn how you learn
So where are the hisses now? Come on now, people. Thank you. I need some equal opportunity derision. Okay, so how many of you had seen that commercial? Okay, a few of you, right? How many of you saw it on YouTube? You just kind of saw it out in the wild? Okay, that's cool. First of all, I think there is value in listening to professors talk, obviously. Good. Good. Okay, so I think that's great. I do not think that any learning revolution will consist of allowing you to watch professors talk on every mobile device you can imagine. I just don't think that's the way. Really, I don't. I think there is value, real but limited value. So here's this Kaplan commercial about, hey, it's your time. It's your time to listen to me tell you that it's your time on the mobile device of your choice, wherever you want to be. So I will tell you again and again, it's your time. I have failed you. That will be on the exam. Did you get that? I have failed you, right? And it's your time. So this, as you can see, is a commercial provider with the great subdomain talent. So somebody's got to get out there and register talent. We need a top-level domain for that. And so there we are, a different school of thought, not so much. And it went up on YouTube. This is why this linking stuff is so important, because on YouTube, this commercial was outed. That's not a real professor. It's Uncle Phil from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And you should see the comment stream. Wow, Uncle Phil, you've lost weight. You look great. This is wonderful. No one in the comment stream said, it's my time. I get that now. My learning has been revolutionized. I feel interactive and empowered and everything. They didn't do that. So Kaplan, of course, objected that you were using copyrighted content to out their inauthentic, staged, your time fail of education thing. And so it came down, but not before I downloaded it. So this is a problem. This is a real problem. There are folks who know that we are looking through the wrong end of the telescope in higher ed, and they are ready to step in to furnish us with a learning revolution that isn't. And some of them, I think, mean well. Absolutely. And I don't mean that in a condescending sense. This is messy. This is hard. More potential neural connections than stars in the sky? That's complicated. Really, it's complicated. Also, you have a brain that can make your brain different. Okay? Got that? You hack into your own neural wetware. We call it living on a daily basis. In fact, just by seeing your expressions now, even those hisses, those delicious hisses, you hacked into my neural wetware, as I am now hacking into yours. It's what we do for each other. Seriously, that's how civilization is built. That's an amazing thing to be a steward of. That's a hard thing to fail at. It's a harder thing to succeed at. This is tough stuff. So I don't want to suggest that, oh, Kaplan's the devil, we'll just drive that out. Done. Or learning management system here is the devil, we'll drive that out. Done. None of that is necessarily true. People do try to work hard on these things, but I think we're looking at the wrong end of the telescope. We're looking through the wrong end of the telescope. Seymour Papert puts it this way in The Children's Machine in 1993, which I cannot recommend highly enough to you. It's just an extraordinary book. In my view, almost all experiments purporting to implement progressive education have been disappointing because they simply did not go far enough in making the student the subject of the process rather than the object. The Children's Machine is a book about education in the age of computing, pre-World Wide Web, pre-smartphones. And yet if you read it today, you will see a couple of things. First of all, Papert and profit are kind of an interesting off-rhyme. Papert understood something very deeply, in part because of his work with Piaget, about the complexities and the sparkling promise of human cognition. And the other thing that will hit you if you read it is that the change Papert called for and the disastrous consequences of not embracing that change, the change hasn't happened, the disastrous consequences are all around us. I don't think it's too late, but we have to recognize the scale. So here, it seems to me, is the end of the telescope to look through. The stored program computer is conceived by Alan Turing, oh so 60 or 70 years ago, not that long ago, and delivered by John von Neumann, broke the distinction between numbers that mean things and numbers that do things. Our universe would never be the same. What we have invented as symbols, as representations, out of our consciousness, out of our cognition, can now actually do work within the world. Well, we always knew that. Any library worth its salt is stunning evidence that the things that mean and the things that do have this marvelous and fragile relationship in civilization. The computer was built to do that very rapidly. But of course, just as if you don't understand about books and writing and you go into a library, all the books are mute, or you do one of those term papers where you go to find the person who said the thing that you need the person to have said, that you can cite in the paper by MLA or Chicago or Turabian or whatever, and you put it in there and you begin, for hundreds of thousands of years, men and women all over the world, and your instructor's face goes down into the plate of spaghetti because you've killed him, it's all over, you know, everything dead, everything inert. You need to be able to understand this relationship between meaning and doing with language before you can use a library well. Same thing with the computer, maybe on steroids. Don't take it from me, take it from Alan Kay, who actually invented this idea of what he called the Dynabook, which is actually something like a laptop, something like a smartphone, something like an iPad, let's say, although he hates to hear people say that because the iPad is a rough, crude approximation of the kind of computing environment that Alan Kay imagined. And in 1975 or 6, okay? He's working with Adele Goldberg at Xerox Palo Alto Research Center, and now, fast forward all these years later, this is something that Alan Kay said at the National Institute for Technology and Liberal Education at the keynote address he gave just last spring in 2012, and you will see that he has had whatever the coffee is that I'm having.
Because people only value these things the way they value their TV sets.
He's pointing to a
Not a
computer.
question about whether they can afford it or not. It's a question of value. People have multiple cars, et cetera, et cetera. They know what a car is good for. They have no idea what this thing is just a convenient way of dealing with stuff they're already familiar with. Most people never do anything remotely like what I was showing you today on the computer. They just use it for the fact that it can represent descriptions of anything. Right? So in fact, we are actually in a more dangerous condition now than we were 30 years ago. It's exactly the opposite, in my opinion. And the reason is that the reason stated that, for instance, these things are being sold in many places, particularly iPads, are being sold as textbooks replacement. We don't want to replace textbooks. They suck. I was showing you a textbook. Textbook of the future is something where you're not shown something, you're given advice on how to create a model for yourself of this knowledge. So we couldn't be in worse shape now than we were. The iPad, because of Apple's restrictions, Apple doesn't want its app store to be overdone. So if you give iPads out to students, you're giving them something in which nobody can do one of these projects, put it out on the internet, and download. These projects that the children did cannot be shared with each other over the internet on an iPad. Apple forbids it. You got to look at what's actually, McLuhan. Forget about just, first order heuristic, whatever I think is going on isn't going on. What is going on? So the answer is, well, maybe I should look and see what people back in the 60s and 70s were doing. I take a look at what Engelbart, the inventor of the mouse, was doing in the 60s. Compare it to the World Wide Web and you'll go, because Engelbart's conception was cosmic and superior, and we don't have it yet.
Doug Engelbart's conception was cosmic and superior, and we don't have it yet. People look at computers as if they're really rapid electric typewriters with memory and fins, and you can play Angry Birds on your smartphone. These are all fine. These are all fine. wrong end of the telescope. Alan Kay was there when they were building computers, changing the way our world was going to be moving forward. And we haven't caught up to that. We don't even recognize it. And this is enormously frustrating. As somebody who did a lot with faculty development and continued to do a lot with faculty development, I just got increasingly puzzled why this was so difficult. What was the conceptual framework that wasn't there to be able to understand some part of this? And I got lucky. For my sins, I was made an administrator, which meant I started reading different things than I would ordinarily read. One day I was reading, believe it or not, InfoWorld magazine, because I was evaluating vendor solutions. And there is, in this universe, a force for good, because I turned to an article that mentioned Doug Engelbart, whose name I had never heard before, and a fellow named Vannevar Bush, who used to work just down the road, whose name I had never heard before. He was FDR's science advisor. He was someone who shepherded the Manhattan Project, which was a very fraught project, as you may remember. But he was someone who thought very hard about the state of civilization. And as I read these things, it was a little sidebar in this article. There were links, so I could go and read some of these documents on the World Wide Web. And as I read them, I began to think, oh, first of all, I had a liberal arts education, Wake Forest University. Yes, Demon Deacons. I hope that's caught on tape somewhere. Yeah, all right. No, that's fine. We're good. And bless you, I take that as an approbation. It was probably a sneeze. So, nobody had me read Augmenting Human Intellect, a Conceptual Framework. 1962, a document that led directly to the internet, to interactive computing, to this idea of online collaboration. Directly. It's out on the web. If you've got a computer, it's fine. Check out and start reading it now. It's better than anything I could say about it, except to say, go read it. As we may think, Vannevar Bush's founding document of what you might think of as a kind of general education in information science, it's out there, it's on the web. As we may think, he posits something very interesting. What if we got everyone together to work on something as exciting, unifying, extraordinary in peacetime as we were able to do when we were racing the Germans to build an atomic bomb? What would that be like? Because in Los Alamos, though there were lots of shady things going on, there was also an atmosphere in which it didn't matter who you were or where you came from. If you had a good idea, in we go, because there was some urgency in the air. And Bush says, what if we were able to do this during peacetime? What if we got all these great minds together and there was something exciting there? What would that be like? Oh, it could be like, as human beings, we produce interesting things faster than we can make use of them. Many vital things go unnoticed because we can't find our way back to them. What could we do if we made a machine that would help us with this discovery? And I made that the founding document of a course called, eventually, Cognition, Learning, and the Internet. And that's what I'd like to share with you now. Vannevar Bush observed in 1945, in the day of vacuum tubes, or valves for the folks from the UK, the world has arrived at an age of cheap, complex devices of great reliability, and something is bound to come of it. Yeah, this is one of them. Okay, so thankfully I was able to find my way to the drop-off point by enlarging the PDF that actually had the information on it that I'd missed earlier. So that worked out okay. All here, right? You've heard all the stats. You know how this is about 10 times more powerful than getting to the moon's computer, and all. It's in your pocket, right? High-definition video in your pocket. So Bush is thinking about this back in 1945, and he's analyzing it at a conceptual level. And he invents this device he calls the Memex, short for memory extender. And the idea is, what if you could build a record of your thinking as you went through a field of information in which you want not just to be able to remember it, but also find your way back, and crucially, share your path with other people. Because we learn not just information, we learn other people's courses through information. We learn from each other's cognition. There's something very recursive and wonderful about it. And Bush says, The human mind operates by association. With one item in its grasp, it snaps instantly to the next that is suggested by the association of thoughts in accordance with some intricate web of trails carried by the cells of the brain. That intricate web of trails. It's a reason that we've invented a World Wide Web. It looks like a brain. It is a brain. But a decentralized brain, sort of like our brain, oh dear, yeah, this is what we do. We build things, as Rodney Brooks has observed, that are lifelike, so that we begin to understand life a little more. So this is 1945, okay? And what Bush maps out is something that looks a lot like what would end up being computers and the World Wide Web. And there were experiments in computing going on at this time, so he wasn't operating completely in the dark. But he got to the conceptual level and has a great statement of hope at the end of the essay that goes something like this: presumably, if man is better able to review his shady past, he will actually be able to learn from it, which is the gamble. The gamble we're all taking. If we actually devote ourselves to better reviewing our shady past, can we make it better? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see, I suppose. But if you don't think you can make it better, I don't know why you'd be in education. I guess to kind of preserve the uneasy status quo, but there's not fun in that. Can we actually gain some ground? Can we actually build a better world? Because we had better. And if we don't, the world just goes away because we poison the planet and it's all done. Bush understood that there might be a way to invent a machine to amplify our intellects so that we would have a fighting chance of ingenuity outstripping destruction. 1945. This is why we have computers. This is what they're supposed to be for. And the people who invented the computing world that we are in today had this in mind. And that was a revelation to me. J.C.R. Licklider, who invented the ARPANET, no one knows what it would do to a creative brain to think creatively continuously. Perhaps the brain, like the heart, must devote most of its time to rest between beats. But I doubt that this is true. I hope it is not, because interactive computers can give us our first look at unfettered thought. Not undisciplined thought, not random thought. We can't really do random anyway. Our brains don't do random. We have to build machines to do random because our brains are always making meaning out of things. But unfettered thought, stuff not limited by accidents of time or space, or ideally, birth, geographic region. We haven't built that world yet, but computers were imagined to help us build that world. Computers represent a yearning for something like what Licklider is outlining here. And this is in a book called Computers and the World of the Future, 1962, and I wonder if J.C.R. Licklider were among us today, would he think we were closer to thinking creatively continuously? I don't know. And this is Doug Engelbart. You heard Alan Kay talk about Doug Engelbart. Doug Engelbart is known primarily today as the inventor of the mouse. He did invent the mouse. It is true that Leonardo da Vinci did a few quick sketches in a book as well. Not true enough, though. Engelbart understood what might happen if we could equip people to think together at scale in ways that we hadn't before. This was his dream. We do not speak of isolated, clever tricks that help in particular situations. We refer to a way of life in an integrated domain, where hunches, cut and try, intangibles, and the human feel for a situation usefully coexist with powerful concepts, streamlined terminology and notation, sophisticated methods, and high-powered electronic aids. In short, civilization inventing ways to make civilization better. And we can disagree on what better might mean. If we're in the humanities, that's a lot of what we do for a living, is disagree on better. But I think we can at least have some benchmarks. Fewer people dying because of impure water. That works. More people having access to the means by which they may augment their own intellect in community with others. That works. More people able to reach across boundaries of physical disability, for example, to be able to fulfill the potential that they have. That works. And Doug Engelbart believed that if we could augment human intellect by means of these things that we now carry around in our pockets, which would take some careful thought, doesn't happen automatically, that we might actually be able to build a better world together. And Alan Kay, whom you've already heard from, went even farther and said, the computer is an instrument whose music is ideas. I'm convinced if in higher education we can begin to get our heads around this statement, we will begin to do things that are something other than rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. And I'm trying to do that in a number of ways. One of them involves analog technology. In fact, in this one, held together with duct tape, which is the ultimate analog technology. I see you. There are some users in the room. Full disclosure, I don't get anything from the duct tape people for hawking their products. Nor will I get anything from the people who put together the New Media Reader for hawking their product. But how many of you have seen this volume, the New Media Reader? Okay, a few of you. Yes. We have some wonderful ringers in the house, and I will call them up to be completely unstaged Confederates to be sawn in half here in just a moment. This book actually contains an extraordinary, interdisciplinary, historically rich, conceptually diverse set of writings about what's called new media, which really is another name for the digitally saturated world of communicative expertise and symbolic representation. And it's all there between hardcovers from the MIT Press, your assurance of quality, with duct tape and a CD-ROM at the back. Remember that? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Scott says, CD-ROM. All right. Yeah, remember back in the day, you could actually hold it in your hand. None of this connectivity stuff. Laserdiscs too. Okay. Sorry, I'm going to digress with Scott. We're going to have some geeking out old school. So, this is the book that I use in my class. And let me say a little bit about this class to you. I have, over time, successfully misbehaved in all the areas of university life using this particular course. It's a course called From Memex to YouTube. Everyone knows what YouTube is. They don't know what the Memex is. Good. All right. We got a little sphere of inquiry here. Good. And I now have a faculty staff development seminar that has graduate students in it as well. And in fact, we have someone right down front today who can offer a survivor's testimony of being in such a group. Bringing together librarians, people from, can you imagine, Central IT, and professors from all over the university. I've branched out significantly into the engineering culture now that I'm at Virginia Tech, because one must. And so I've got those engineering colleagues in there as well. And it's great. You know, the librarians find out that the quality assurance people in IT are actually pretty smart and imaginative. And the quality assurance people in IT are high-fiving the physics professors because finally they can come to a meeting of the minds about force concepts. And it just goes on. And every now and then there's a humanities person in there too. And that works. Absolutely. We get together. And this is a class that is also offered for credit as a cross-listed upper-level honors class as well as a graduate level preparing the future professoriate class there at Virginia Tech. It's also networked, which is where the pitch is going to come, so hang on. This is the syllabus. This is an exploration of what's the resonance frequency among all of these writers, all of these visionaries, and I lead about the first 3 sessions, and after that it's presentation time, so people must carry the class forward. And it becomes a class about learning. A class about learning in the digital age, a class about communicating classes about learning in the digital age. It just gets more and more recursive that way. We do social bookmarking, sharing stuff up to Delicious. Delicious has kind of jumped the shark. So if anybody's got a social bookmarking site they really want to, pitch to me, that would be great. I know about Digo already, that's cool. I've thought about Pinterest, I'm not sure. We have to talk about this. Because all this stuff breaks, none of it lasts, that's okay. It's like people, It's great, it's no problem. We use Twitter in all of these circumstances, especially with the undergrads because they're a little more flexible than the faculty in this regard, typically. Nevertheless, I continue to hold out hope, and we have an embedded librarian in the Twitter stream so that when students are tweeting about cognition, learning, and the internet, they're using the internet to tweet about cognition, learning, and the internet, and there's a cognition, learning, and internet specialist called a librarian who is off in library world across the campus, watching the Twitter stream, united by the class hashtag, and every now and then doing what my wonderful partner in crime at Baylor called librarian jazz. And what Ellen meant by that, I believe, Ellen, correct me if I'm wrong, she'll probably tweet a correction shortly, so watch the hashtag. What that means is inferring from the Twitter stream what the heck Dr. C is doing this day and how the students are going in all sorts of different directions, and popping in key little prompts like, oh, we have a journal you might be interested in, or, oh, you just learned what onerology is. Oh, that's interesting. We have an encyclopedia of dreams. Did you know that? Link. And there you go. Now, here's a partner in crime at Virginia Tech, the talented Rebecca K. Miller, who is also egging people on, which librarians do. I married one for that very reason. Julie Heseltine. She's kind of ob ovo at this point. It's my Latin for the day. She hasn't quite got an avatar. And so really liking this discussion, which I didn't see while the class was going on, but I was very happy to see afterwards. And she uses the class hashtag. One of the other students in the class, what's the best, most interesting part for you personally? That's because Jake was on the meta team. I'll get to that. And then the librarian chimes in and, yeah, tell me. And then Julie says, it's connecting all the dots. Ah, learning. As I'm looking at Nelson, Ted Nelson, Computer Lib, Dream Machines, I'm thinking back to what we've talked about in past classes. Always a good learning technique. There it is. So essentially, all the learners are ganging up on each other in the most beautiful communal way in real time with a Twitter stream, which I can then make an image of and share with you today. And then there's blogging. There is, in the blogging, entries like this from Lissy Kane, Deeper Yet Again, which is always a blog title to make a teacher feel good. Yes, not just deeper, deeper yet again. After first reading McCloud, I was pleased that we had such a straightforward and easy to understand piece. It's a comic, okay? If you've read Understanding Comics, you know about Scott McCloud. To ease us back from spring break, boy, was I wrong. Yes, there was a little bit of teacher stealth there, I confess. Once we started discussing it in class Tuesday, I realized how extremely complex and weird the piece was. Complex is good, weird is even better. Weird starts the learning. Complex students are kind of like, oh, I need to take a lot of notes. But weird, you know, when the going gets weird, the weird sign up for this class, and that's great. And I can see that this is happening. The class sees that it's happening. The world sees that it's happening. All this stuff is out on the open web, and the students knew it was going there. I mentioned the meta team. It's a class called Cognition, Learning, and the Internet. So we need to display cognition, advance learning, and internet the internet while we're doing this class. How do you internet the internet? You create more networks within the network. That's how you do that. So the meta team, and I told them, you've got to be on the meta team. I need volunteers. It's an anagram. And they just looked at me. And I said, Google it. And then I got some people, they were signed up. That was good. So the people on the meta team were assigned to make a rich, complex digital representation of the cognition and learning and interneting that had happened during the course called Cognition, Learning, and the Internet. So the good news was they had a final project about a third of the way through the course. And that's always a moment of, you know, the students are like, final project, but they're clear sailing. The bad news was they had to give an account of the whole course to the course publicly on the internet as a result of the Cognition and Learning in the Internet. It was a meta team, a meta project. And this is what they made. They made a website which had Wordles, very simple and effective kind of data visualization, collecting the activity of their fellow students across all of the blogging, all of the tweeting, all of the other final projects through the whole semester. You get the recursion here? Constantly make for yourselves representations of the things that you're constantly making for yourself. If you can get hold of that, you can make that happen with whatever you're learning. And it will actually help your learning. You narrate your learning to yourself. So they built this. This was one page. This was the Who page. And what they did was take the blogs that they had written during each of the essayists that were assigned for that week and had done a search across all of the blogs and made a Wordle out of the words used across the class during each of those particular essayists. And if this were live and on the web, which it is live and on the web, if you want to go see it, there's a URL there, and I'll be happy to send that to anyone who would like to see it. But what happens is you click on the visualization, you click on these Wordles, and up comes the Wordle, and there are links within the Wordles to blog posts, to information sites, to things that we have read, to stuff that was uploaded to Delicious. Linking back, linking out, linking to the linkings. And you can go to the what? And this is a thematic search across all of the students' blog posts in the semester, revealing things that they were surprised by. They said, well, when we made a Wordle out of, for example, media, people was bigger than video. Why, yes, it was. Yes, we are. Oh, that's interesting. And then on the why, they wrote their essay in which they very carefully mapped out what they understood to be the purpose of the final project and of the class itself. And the wonderful part is that at this point, I got it too. It's like the old joke of the physicist who was teaching quantum mechanics. He taught it once, students didn't understand it. Taught it again, students still didn't understand it. Taught it the third time, he finally understood it. And this was a great moment because they presented this to the class, and it was this wonderful kind of, it was like the video that you made for Beth. It was for the class, a gift of the class to itself. And they had co-conspired with the librarian, not the librarian, sorry, our librarian, the one who had been our guardian librarian the whole time. And they'd put all of this together, and they also left a little spot for other folks to contribute as well. Now, had we but whirled enough in time, there's another poem for you. I would show you more, because it keeps happening. It happens in the faculty staff development seminar. It happens in the undergraduate/graduate seminar. In fact, this year, the folks taking the course for credit kept asking me, Dr. C, can we go to the adult class? And then they thought that sounded kind of funny, and they said, we don't mean like the XXX class. We mean where the grown-ups are. And then that kind of sounded funny too, because they knew I was there, and that didn't make any sense at all. So I said, yeah, we could work this out. And then there was a stroke of good fortune, and chance favors the prepared mind. Or to put it another way, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And I was ready, so my students appeared. You got that, right? So there was a day that one of my colleagues was supposed to facilitate the discussion in the New Media Faculty Staff Development Seminar, which is networked, by the way. That means that you could do it here and be part of the network. Just saying. Be happy to. I have a small form for you to sign at the end of, no. My colleague was not able to facilitate the day we were doing Sherry Turkle's essay on video games and computer holding power. It's an essay from the 1980s in which she explores what it is that so gets us into these gaming worlds and holds us there. Some things are not so good that hold us there. Some things are actually quite fascinating that hold us there. And this is a gaming generation in ways that are sometimes difficult for folks a little farther along in life's journey, like myself, to fully appreciate. So my colleague she was going out of town. She wasn't able to do the day she'd signed up for. And I thought, well, great, I'll facilitate it. I love to facilitate, you can tell that. And then I said, no, this is the day they come to the adult class. Oh, yeah. So I gave my students the assignment, and they didn't ask about extra credit, which was one indication that maybe this was working okay. I said, why don't you come and lead the adult, don't just come to the adult class, come and lead the adult class. And I wish you could have been there. They led the adult class. They turned one configurable classroom where everything moves and there's no obvious reset, no obvious front of room. They turned the whole room into a game. From tic-tac-toe and Sudoku to stuff going on with Kinect and the Xbox 360, card tricks at one table. But the trick was if you sat down to get a card trick, that was an immediate cue for them to take you level up. There was a little Easter egg card trick it's hard to fall. So they would take you to the other section where you would either do Who's Got the Hat. Anybody played Who's Got the Hat in here before? I will not spoil that for you. You're welcome. And if you didn't play that, it would be What's Behind the Green Glass Door. Anybody played What's Behind the Green Glass Door? I'm not going to spoil it for you. So, but play it sometime because it's great. And so here were 2 freshmen, 1 sophomore who says he's got a senior's level credit bank for architecture. I don't understand how that works. Credit hours confuse me. And 2 graduate students, a mechanical engineer and an electrical engineer, leading the adult class through an exploration of experiential gaming in an entire room that then led into a beautiful discussion of the Sherry Turkle essay on video games and computer holding power. And they all blogged about it. The freshmen, the sophomore, the graduate students, the faculty, the staff. And they reinforced this thing that Sherry Turkle writes in that very essay. Things that give a sense of contact with the infinite are held apart as privileged. They become charged with emotion. The feeling can be evoked by a sunset, a mountain, the sea. It can be evoked by mathematical experiences, the idea of the infinite sequence of decimals of pi. And these feelings are evoked by the computer. Now, if it were an SAT test, which it isn't, but if it were, and I said, which one doesn't belong? Sunset, mountain, computer. That'd be pretty easy, except it isn't. It isn't. We invented computing out of a sense of contact with the infinite, both the inside that's bigger than the outside, inside our own heads, and the infinite potential we have in community together. We don't always use it that way. But what's new? We don't use language that way all the time. We don't even use families that way, or churches that way, or governments that way. But at their best, they can give that feeling, charged with emotion, a sense of contact with the infinite. Held apart as privileged. Or, a synonym for held apart as privileged, holy. Held back as something that's extraordinary. Janet Murray writes, how long will it take before we see the gift for what it is? A single new medium of representation, the digital medium, formed by the braided interplay of technical invention and cultural expression at the end of the 20th century. Seeing the gift for what it is means looking through the right end of the telescope. I've given you one example of how I've tried to do that, but it's only one. There are many, many others out there. We've seen some of them today. We need more. We don't have nearly enough. Uncle Phil is great. I don't want him being the sage on the stage. I don't want that, where we can keep watching people simply talking over and over on a myriad portable devices. But it's hard. It's hard. Don't take it from me. Take it from Captain Jean-Luc Picard. Okay, I know, that's a trump card, and I'm playing it. How many of you remember this episode? It ends well. Captain Picard has had a very bad brush with technology just before this moment. He's been turned into a machine, which is part of what we fear these technologies will do. He's been turned into a member of the Borg collective and given the assignment of killing his dearest friends. He survives. He's rehabilitated. He becomes human. And he continues to be in love with what ingenuity can do to further human reach, exploration, and communication. His brother doesn't agree. His brother runs a vineyard in France, where Jean-Luc has gone to be reunited with his family and to try to come back to a sense of what it means to be human in a context that's very removed from what the Borg did to him. But Jean-Luc is a man of comprehensive vision. His brother has his own comprehensive vision. And I want to watch this clip with you, and I'm setting it up at some length because this conversation is a difficult one. And you will see how Captain Jean-Luc Picard tries to navigate this difficult and essential conversation.
So, c'est ravi. This is 46. 47. You've been drinking too much of that artificial stuff. What do you call it? Synthahol. Spoil you. Ruin your palate. On the contrary, I think that Simba Hall heightens one's appreciation for the genuine article. Delicious. Leave it to Robert to find the best cook in France and marry her.
Yeah. Sadly, cooking is becoming a lost art. That's your wretched technology again.
Robert and I have had more than a few discussions about getting a replicator in the house.
I remember the same discussion during Mother and Father. Father understood better than anybody else the danger of losing those values which we hold most precious. I don't see that you have to lose anything just by adding the convenience.
But we would. But in my view, life is already too convenient.
This is a very old argument.
This is a very old argument. But I hope with at least some of the things we have built for ourselves, used wisely in a community of learners, which is what we are privileged to be among, that we can take this old argument and if not come to the end of it, at least make it better. Thanks very much. So you've got something else scheduled, I'm sure, but if there's any time, I'm happy to field questions or happy to speak with folks before I head out again. What's next? Is it 2 o'clock? 10, 15 minutes? Okay. All right. Stinging rebuttals. Go.
How is benchmarking of the better different from creating rubrics?
That's an excellent question. How is benchmarking of the better different from creating rubrics? Rubrics are not haunting, in my experience, or maybe like nightmare haunting. Where in the rubric is the part that says all rubrics are necessarily incomplete? Fill in a standard by which you want to be judged here. Rubrics don't usually do that because that would be the place. It would be like asking the genie for 3 more wishes at the end of 3 wishes. It takes a thing that is contained and defined and explodes it again. I think if we can't do that, we're not actually going to have an authentic measure. We're not going to have a formative kind of assessment. So I choose the word haunting for a reason. There is in the either the latest or next to latest, a New Yorker, a great story about a physician in Brooklyn, a Dr. Lieber, at a hospital where they see people from all over, every disease that you can imagine. Mostly these are folks who are poor and don't have access to some of the more elite health care. And this fellow has been there for, 30 years or so. He actually went to medical school in Guadalajara because he wasn't able to get into medical schools in the US. So there he is. It turns out he really was a genius, so there was a fail there. Something didn't work out with the assessment for medical school. But anyway, in there, it talks about him as a teacher. And it says that as a teacher, Dr. Lieber is haunting, meaning that the way he steers the particular parameters of the conversation always will leave some part of the conversation puzzling and open in ways that cause the students to continue to mull things over. So that's my answer to your extremely good and reasonable question. When rubrics say, here's what we want, here's what you must do, having done it, here's how you will be judged, that's necessary but not sufficient. The part that then just makes all of that open again and gives us what Argyris calls double loop learning, where in the midst of our progress we actually figure out what it was that we were trying to get to as we began. That part needs to be in there. And if there are rubrics that have that, I would welcome that, because that's kind of the secret sauce. If I can be about poetry again for a moment, you know, lines, and the ends of lines have meaning, and yet Milton loved to do what he called sense variously drawn out, which doesn't work unless there are ends of lines. It also doesn't work unless you transgress the ends of lines. And if you do both of those at once, now I'm talking about Paradise Lost, so we really will be here all afternoon. But that's an essential part of the way poetry plays with time, and I would love to see rubrics and assessment play with that as well. But thank you for that question. It's a very good one. Other questions? Yes?
So, clear from your talk that you're a fan of ideas.
Yes?
Kind of the more the better. And it's also clear that you think some ideas are better than others.
Yes.
Right? So, what perplexes me is how you filter ideas and what sort of selection processes are going to separate the good from the bad. Or are we allowed to say that some ideas are good and some are bad?
Oh, I think we should say some ideas are good and some ideas are bad. I think it's, we all have to make those distinctions. If we say we don't, I think we're not being very candid. But now we're in the process of judgment. How do you exercise judgment? Well, now we're into the second keynote that I will give this afternoon, which has to do with, actually, I'm only joking a little bit. I'm not going to, write, first prize is 1 keynote, second prize is 2 keynotes. Although I would love to. I actually, believe it or not, I gave a talk about this yesterday. and it has to do with wisdom. Wisdom having to do with the arts of judgment over a lifespan. And developing that in a digital age where the ideas are apparently infinitely accessible. And because they're ideas, doggone them anyway. If they're really good ideas, they'll be generative as well as substantive. That is, the idea will not be just something you just say, oh, I vote for that forever, that's it. It gives you another idea. So the things just keep multiplying, like little bunnies in your mind, right? How do you distinguish? How do you discriminate? How do you judge? How can you be wise? How can you do that? I like, first of all, Miss Frizzle's advice in Magic School Bus. Take chances, get messy. As a researcher, I couldn't do anything other than that, right? So a willingness to be wrong has to precede the effort to be right, and that can have disastrous consequences. That's the cost of doing business. But the other thing is, none of us has to do this alone. So if you see people, and this is kind of the wisdom thing too, if you see people who seem to be able to live creatively, robustly, well, what are the ideas they're interested in? What are they reading? What are they listening to? And there should be more than one. Some should be living ascetic lives, some should be living Rabelaisian lives, just to get the extremes of the continuum going, right? Seriously, absolutely. You know, don't choose one approach, and for heaven's sakes, don't listen to me saying don't choose one approach, etc. Right? Keep it stirred, keep it going. Be wide-ranging in your curiosity. Read things that stimulate curiosity. Never be satisfied without curiosity. At the same time, ponder, reflect, mull. At the same time, drink rabble-rouser. You have to do all of those, right? So, in the end, I don't have a cookbook for that. If I did, you shouldn't be trusting that either. It has to do with a very strange and recursive process. There's an essay that I love very much by a writer named Walker Percy called The Law. Anybody Walker Percy readers in here? Yeah? Yes! All right. But you like him, right? Okay. All right. Well, I didn't hear anything, so okay. He writes an essay called The Loss of the Creature, which is in essence about some of the dilemmas that you're outlining there. And he doesn't have a recipe, which is why I love to assign it as the first essay that my freshman composition students would write on. Because they believed, A, we're in college, so now we're going to learn which ideas are right and which are wrong. And B, they simply needed to track that and be able to give it back on cue. And Percy just messed all of that up, completely messed it all up, but in ways that were useful to keep that process of thinking going. So I do not have an answer for you, except to say that I believe in wisdom, I believe in the pursuit of wisdom, and I believe there are many ways to get there, and I try to find people who, to me, either aesthetically, Rabelaisian-esquely, or by other means, digitally, CD-ROMs, analog, unschooled, seem to be moving in an interesting direction, and I try to be in conversation with them. And I can do that now, even if I'm not living with them physically. I can do that worldwide. That's what I try to do. So I don't have an answer. I'm sorry. Yes? One more.
Quick follow-up.
Yes?
As I understand it, it's about the journey of finding these representations. And you just said when you arrive at wisdom, do you ever arrive?
Do you ever arrive? So there are two answers to that question.
I was trying to catch you.
Yeah, I know. I've never had an academic try to catch me before. All right, that's the only lie I've told today. And like any good grad student who's been piled high and deep, which is what I understand that the degree stands for, I will catch you right back, my friend. So if I say you can't arrive at wisdom, then that means that I cannot say anyone is truly wise. But I've met people along my journey whom I think are truly wise.
Did they think they were wise?
No. They did not think they were wise. And frankly, if they did, they might not be wise. On the other hand, there's another wrinkle to that. I know some wise people, and I believe they know they're wise, but they would never say that of themselves. But I think it's important to know, and maybe this is another way to not answer your very good question. I have many ways of evading. Because I'm in the humanities, I have many ways of evading questions. All of them articulate. One of the things that matters to me, and I've heard a lot of interviewers that do this with people who are wise. You want to know, do you understand the magnitude of what it is that you're contributing? And one of the things I love to do is go and thank people for the magnitude of what they've contributed to me. And I want them to understand it. They will say humble things back to me. But I hope inside of them they know somehow that the bruises that have bruises, the stuff they've had to go through to get where they are, because the journey is never easy and intermittently pleasant, but nobody comes and shakes your hand for trying to go along the hard path of wisdom. They really don't, despite what you see at all the conferences where they hand out prizes and stuff. It's no. Wise people are almost inevitably disruptive, simply because they're wise. I hope in their heart of hearts that they do feel they've gotten somewhere, because I want them to receive my thanks. You know? I want them to believe that, because it's hard. One of the best things that ever happened to me in graduate school, and it made me into a Miltonist, doggone it, was when my teacher said to me, I believe we practice biographical criticism, and I was waiting for it, so we can debunk the whatever bad group you belong to, right? Or we can critique whatever psychological disruption resulted in the art of John Milton, which we could talk about, because he was a psychologically interesting person. But he didn't say that. What my teacher said to me was, we practice biographical criticism because we want to know whom to thank. So I hope, even though the wise people will never say, yes, that's right, I'm wise, because that would be kind of a bad, awkward moment for everyone, I hope that there is also some sense of having arrived at some powers of discrimination, if you have made that contribution to other people, so that at least you can take some solace in the effort that you've made. I hope that that's true. And there's actually a moment on YouTube where you can see me in a very effusive and demonstrative moment telling one of my teachers publicly that I loved her while holding up the last paper I wrote for her, which is covered in red ink, which I say I cannot tell from my life's blood anymore. This was the woman at Wake Forest who made me into an English major. I believe she was wise. And she would never have claimed that. She was far too salty and weird ever to say anything like that. But she was. And I got to thank her. And I put it up on YouTube, and she couldn't stop me. So, thank you all very much.